Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 4. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving break. This week's announcement, I'd like to start with just a few things that came up while I was grading the exams. The first thing is that idea of equality versus equity. And I'd really like you to think about the idea that equity is everyone getting what they need as opposed to equal is everybody getting the same. So an example I have, which is that if you're sitting at an IEP team meeting and someone has a heart attack, is it fair that one person gets CPR and no one else does? Probably not. What's equitable is that the person who is having the cardiac issue gets treated for the cardiac issue. So I know that's sort of a crazy example, but I hope that gives you sort of the flavor when I talk about the difference between equity versus equality. And what I'd like to see people is to really think in that frame of equity, especially with regard to inclusion, which is everybody getting what they need, but what they need is probably not the same. Another one is something called response to intervention. If you work in Connecticut, you may have heard it called SRBI, scientifically research-based intervention. The rest of the country, RTI, response to intervention. And what that is students through general education should be receiving something that's usually referred to as tiered supports, which means 80% of the children, if you think of a big triangle, the base of that triangle is that 80% of students should be making effective progress, getting just high quality regular education instruction. And then there's 15% as the triangle gets narrower that may need some more intensive interventions like small group or some kind of other kind of more intensive instruction. And then we think of the top of that regular ed pyramid, that 5% may need some individual instruction. Now, this is all through regular education. And typically what we're looking at is when a teacher identifies that a student is struggling, what we really would like to see is that they go through this tiered intervention or response to intervention process to make sure that they're getting all the instruction that they need through regular ed. And then if that doesn't work, a referral to special ed may be necessary. I do want to add just a little asterisk to that there are times where you go right to a referral. Those times should be relatively few. And that's when you really suspect there's a disability. There's an issue there that makes everyone suspect that we need to go right to an evaluation. But again, we do look for collecting data through regular education, through what kind of interventions have taken place. You cannot make it a requirement that happen, but that is the best practice. So when I say not a requirement, I mean, you can't tell a family, I'm sorry, you want to refer your child, but first we have to do response to intervention. If a parent asks for a referral, typically a parent gets a referral. So I know that that's sort of complicated. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But the big idea here is that through regular education, there should be that tiered system of support to be able to get kids what they need through regular education. And then if that doesn't work, bringing that data to an IEP team. I hope that was clear. I'm afraid I got a little, that it's complex and it's sort of hard to understand in a little nutshell. The other thing that I was actually sort of surprised that a lot of people got the answer incorrect was about Section 504. Remember, Section 504 is not a special education law. It is a federal civil rights law. It's federal civil rights legislation. It is not funded. But any entity that takes any kind of federal money is required to follow Section 504. Again, a civil rights law. And the last thing I just wanted to briefly mention was about least restrictive environment. And in special education, one of the things that we talk about is that there needs to be a continuum of supports. And that means that there's a continuum of least restrictive environment. Just like we talked about a moment ago, the pyramid for response to intervention, think of that continuum as most children can access their education with specialized instruction, appropriate supports and services in regular education. But that is not the least restrictive environment for all students. Some students, their least restrictive environment could be a separate class for all or part of the day, or a separate school, or even a residential school. But as we go into the more restrictive part of that continuum, the number should be smaller and smaller. So I encourage you, when you think of the setting that could be the least restrictive environment for a student, always start in your head with what supports and services would get that child or student successful in general ed. And then only if the team can't figure that out, it's unlikely that the child would be successful, would you continue along that continuum of supports. And remember, that's the big idea here with LRE, is that LRE isn't the same for every child, that the team really has to have that conversation about what is the least restrictive environment as an individual decision for each student. So that wraps up our exam. If you have any questions, or if you've got anything wrong and you just don't understand the correct answer, please reach out and I'd be happy to have an individual conversation with you. So here we are at week 4. We're going to be talking about emotional and behavioral disorders this week. So this week you should be reading chapters 9 and 10 in your text, and there are several videos to watch about emotionally disturbed students, about autism, and about behavior. And this week you're going to have 2 assignments. You're going to have a discussion assignment, and we're going to talk about proactive approaches in the classroom. So for the assignment this week, for our discussion, you're going to think about the statement by Dr. Stephen Shore: if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. What does it mean to you? And make sure that you support your belief of what that statement means with information that you read in your text and anything else that you may have done through your research. I also give you a link to the Autism Speaks website. You can do a little bit of exploration there. And again, any other research that you do on your own. For week 4's regular assignment, again, you can choose between doing a presentation or a traditional written paper. But I want you to discuss the importance of what a classroom environment needs to be like in order to be proactive in addressing students that have emotional and behavioral disorders, how that can benefit the entire class. And remember, I made a few comments in previous posts, something about universal design for instruction. How can you design a classroom that is a proactive environment for students with emotional behavioral disorders that may benefit the rest of the classroom? And then talk about at least 3 different strategies about why the strategy is proactive, and then give some examples of each of the strategies. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I look forward to reading or watching all of your assignments and participating in the discussion this week. Hopefully all of you have either completed your classroom observations or will be doing that in the next week or so. And otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to hearing from all of you this week. Take care.